The final box sat on the desk. Dawn Alexander ran her palm across the cardboard, feeling the grit of dust and the ghost of 20 years. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, lingered in the doorway. "They're ready for you in the boardroom, Miss Alexander," she said. Dawn didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on a single glossy plaque embedded in the wall. Asterisk Dawn Alexander, Director of Community Outreach. It was a consolation prize, hung a decade ago to quiet the noise. The sound of the boardroom door opening down the hall was a sharp, official crack. It was the sound of a gavel. It was the sound of her being erased. 20 years of being the good one, the quiet one, the one who smoothed things over. And for what? She finally asked herself the question that had been whispering in the dark for 2 decades. What was the actual cost of a silence so profound it had become a part of her soul? Dawn had built her career at the monolithic Vandermeer Foundation from the ground up. She was 23, idealistic, armed with a master's in public policy and a belief that systemic change happened from within. She was hired into the Urban Initiatives Department, a siloed corner of the foundation run by a kindly, paternalistic man named Gerald. Gerald was fond of telling Dawn she had a real way with those people, and she would stiffen, smile, and quietly correct his grand proposal language. She became the translator, the bridge, the one who could navigate the foundation's sterile, privileged halls and the vibrant, complex communities it claimed to serve. The imbalance was in the job descriptions. Dawn was a liaison. She watched a man named Stephen who couldn't pronounce the names of the neighborhoods he funded. Dawn was the one who drafted the big picture and quietly solved the crises Stephen's big picture thinking created. Your heart is so in it, Dawn, all while building a glass ceiling so thick it felt like a vault. That her influence was subtle, real. She laughed off the urban expert label that made her sound like a safari guide. She became a master of making other people feel brilliant for discovering ideas she had planted. She banked those moments, using them to drown out the quiet hum of erasure. Dawn had conceived it, shepherded it through back-channel conversations, built the entire framework. It was her life's work, distilled into a proposal. "We're putting Stephen as the face of it," he said, as if offering her a gift. "He needs a win." The injustice was so perfectly packaged, so logical in its own twisted way, that it stole the breath from her lungs. She said she understood. Stephen, now the proud founder of the Campbell Initiative, was holding court. He was butchering the implementation plan, focusing on flashy tech incubators in trendy neighborhoods, completely missing the core need for accessible capital in underserved areas. Dawn tried to interject, her voice calm. "Stephen, if we look at the data from our community surveys," he cut her off with a wave. "Not get bogged down. But Ms. Alexander's data is the whole point." Stephen smiled a tight, dismissive smile. "Let's not get emotional. We're all on the same team." Dawn looked at Maya's face, saw the fiery confusion, the dawning realization of the game. She saw herself, 20 years younger, and in that moment, the calculus that had governed her career broke. The cost of her silence was no longer just her own stifled ambition. It was the blueprint she was leaving for the Mayas who followed. It was a lesson in compromise that looked an awful lot like surrender. She didn't explode. She started a new document, not a journal of hurts, but a ledger. Every helpful suggestion that was actually a dismissal. She stopped editing her expertise. In meetings, she no longer said, "This might be a thought." She stated, "The evidence indicates." The change was subtle, but the atmosphere around her chilled. The board requested a preliminary report on the Campbell Initiative's strategic alignment. "You're the writer, not your report." It was a forensic audit. Page 3. A financial projection showing how his deviations would hemorrhage funds within 18 months. Chart comparing the promotion and compensation trajectories of the foundation. His community-facing staff. She titled it, "The Vandermeer Foundation, a case study in institutional risk and missed purpose." A septuagenarian woman named Eleanor Vance, who was known for her ruthlessness and her fondness for the foundation's legacy. The boardroom summons came the next day. Dawn walked in, expecting to be fired. The long table was full of solemn faces. Gerald wouldn't meet her eye. "Ms. Alexander," she began, her voice like dry ice, "your analysis is unsparing." Dawn simply nodded. She answered not with grievance, but with facts, figures, and the cold, hard language of fiduciary duty and reputational risk. The justice that followed was not a parade. Gerald took early retirement. with Dawn named its official director, with final budgetary authority. But the real shift was in the air. The paternalistic pats on the shoulder stopped. Her expertise was no longer a suggestion, it was a resource. A real one, with a seat at the table where strategy was born, not just implemented. It was everything she'd once thought she wanted. Dawn picked up the final box. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft sigh. Her 20-year fight for respect had ended, with her winning the very thing. It was the vision. It was the understanding that her voice, once polished into silence, had finally found its own purpose. She had built a career on translating for a system that didn't deserve her language. Now, she would speak in her own tongue, on her own terms. The reward for finally speaking was the terrifying, exhilarating freedom to build something new. She walked out into the sunlight, the weight of the box in her arms, nothing compared to the weight she had left behind in that quiet, polished tomb of good intentions. Sometimes, the greatest act of respect you can fight for is the respect you owe yourself.